Welcome to the Hello Sunday podcast with me, Nikki Hayden. This is the podcast that discusses everything self-development, spirituality and sobriety. And it wouldn't be me without a little sprinkling of humour. Whether you are just starting out on your journey of self-development or have been exploring these topics for years, are completely alcohol-free or just curious about living a more sober lifestyle, this is the podcast for you. Each week, I'll be exploring topics in both solo episodes and with some amazing guest experts. So if you like what you hear, then please subscribe, rate and review. So with that said, let's dive into today's episode. Hello, welcome back to Hello Sunday. I hope that you've all had a fantastic week. I hope you're all really good. I hope that you're all getting through the longest month that ever was. And I've got such an exciting guest for you guys today. I really have. It's a guest that I've wanted to get on for a while. So I'm going to step right into it because we've got so much to get through. But for the last 7 years, following his previous role as a deputy manager for the NHS 111 line, this guy has been a wellbeing trainer and provider, and he last year travelled over 2,000 miles during November teaching mental health support. And on World Mental Health Day, he delivered the same training to over 1,500 people across 3 countries on a Teams meeting. I've wanted to get him on the podcast for ages. As I say, he's got the most incredible story. Welcome to the podcast, Ryan Ridgway. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me on, Nikki. Really appreciate it. What an intro that was. You're supposed to under-promise and let me over-deliver, not the other way around.
There won't be any under-delivering here. Your story is incredible, and what you've achieved and what you're doing at the moment is fantastic. So, I'm sure there's going to be loads that we can uncover and dig into today for the listeners. So, for anybody listening that doesn't know you, hasn't come across you, or isn't following you currently on socials, do you want to just give us a little intro into kind of your backstory, I guess, and who you are and how you came to be doing the work that you're doing today?
Yeah, no worries. So following the role as deputy manager for the 111 service, someone asked me if I wanted to be a mental health first aider. And maybe like some of the listeners, I went, what's that? Mental health first aid. I've heard of physical first aid for accidents, trips, slips, falls. Did that course, fell in love with it, connected the dots for me personally with my own journey. But sadly, I was using mental health first aid weekly, sometimes daily, compared to the 3 or 4 times I've ever gone to an accident and applied physical first aid. So shows how many people might need support and need some awareness and need to consider their mental health and well-being. I've been teaching that alongside other courses in the world of mental health, which covers loads for the last 7 years. But the most important part of my experience is I've had my own journey with mental illness. I've lived with it from about the age of 12, earliest memory, and I still can't believe I get to say this, but it was only March 23rd, almost 3 years ago now, I was sectioned under the Mental Health Act for suicidal crisis. So, where relevant, I want to share that journey and hope it forms part of someone else's survival guide.
So let's get back to the beginning then. So when you were a former deputy manager for 111, what exactly did that involve? And then if you can just explain as well exactly what mental health first aid is, because like you say, I've heard of it and I understand the first aid element in a physical sense, but I wouldn't know where to start with it from a mental sense.
Yeah, no worries. So with that role at the 111 service, it was a contact centre role and you had like 500 staff and you had to work alongside the clinical teams, make sure there was enough clinicians on the lines to take the calls, make sure the call handlers were answering the calls in enough time. And I just got close to the mental health team. I got friends with them and, interacted with them. And when I was there was 5 people that worked on the mental health side, and they all worked 9 till 5 every day. But we got most of our mental health related calls and crises after 5 o'clock. So that kind of guided me to want to shape that and improve it and make sure that we were offering enough resource. Mental health first aid is very similar to physical first aid. You're not there as a clinician, you're not there to diagnose, fix or advise, but someone who's willing to recognise the potential signs of poor mental health, someone not doing so good, not being themselves, reaching out in the right way, having that kind conversation without judgment, without assumption or expectation, and then safely signposting to all the resources are available. Because often we think, well, I've got my doctor and I can't get an appointment and I'm going to be on a waiting list for counselling or therapy for 18 months. What else is there? But the mental health first aider will have a greater pool of resource, charities, organisations, not-for-profits, places we can signpost to and information we can give that individual rather than them getting lost in Dr. Google and coming across God knows what. And, in a moment of despair and distress, that can be really overwhelming.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Google, yeah. It's never a good result with Dr. Google, is it?
Yeah, it'll say amputate the entire left side of your body or, and this was my lived experience, Nikki. When I didn't know I had a mental illness, I was like, let me Google, let me get some information. At the top of Google, I found this book. Buy my book. It will cure your anxiety. It's only $150. I paid that amount. I bought that book. It was useless. And I felt even more lost and even more like, well, I've lost hope. I'm hopeless. There's nothing there.
Gosh, yeah, absolutely. If a book could cure you, then gosh, wouldn't that be phenomenal? But yeah, unfortunately, I feel like there's more to it than that, and we'll come on to that. So you got approached to do the mental first aid course, I guess, and to become a mental health first aider. How did that then lead into what you're doing now? Because what you're doing now is taking that message and delivering that course and that advice and that help and that toolkit en masse, essentially, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did that role as a mental health first aider for 3 years at the 111 service and realised the need for it. So I inquired on how I could become a trainer, and the idea would be that I'd teach it back to staff at the NHS. But operationally, there was never time. We can't take people off the phones. So I thought, well, I'll just take this outside of the NHS, and it's just got busier and busier and busier. It was supposed to become a legal requirement equal to physical first aid. You've got to have, by law, a physical first aider. That manifesto was passed pre-COVID, and since then it's gone very quiet. So I'm hoping at some point in the future, you'll have to have, by law, a physical first aider and a mental health first aider, because why would you have one and not the other? And physical health can affect mental health can affect physical health. It's part of our overall health. You can't separate the two.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember in my previous place of work, actually, we were assigned a mental health first aider, but I don't think he really understood the job role. I think he just thought it was like an ear. I don't think that person knew any more about tools or resources or if somebody was genuinely in crisis, I don't think that they would have been able to spot that. There's always more to be done, isn't there? We're just, sort of scratching the surface of this stuff at the moment.
There is. And just do this as an earner. They'll teach physical first aid, working from heights, COSH, and they just kind of bolt it on. But I don't think you can confidently understand and explore and share a space with people when it's mental health first aid unless you work in it. Because I've worked in a mental health service before, supporting some as a support worker, supporting some really poorly people. I've had my own lived experience. So, it really depends on how the trainer delivers that, I think, as well.
Yeah, and that's so important. So let's talk about some of these accolades that I alluded to at the start of this call. So talk to us about Movember and the work that you were doing last year, because I know before we started recording, we were saying, I didn't realise that you'd gone travelling. And you said, I was just too busy to be posting on socials. And actually what I was doing was way more important than content. So yeah, talk us through that and what it involved.
Yeah, so November or Movember, as it's kind of been rebranded, Men's Mental Health Month. Again, that's got busier and busier year on year. And by the data, the numbers, and the data only shows you so much because we're dealing with people, personalities, people mask up and hide it. But it still shows that internationally, those who identify as men will struggle more to the point of crisis. And there's some key trends there. There's societal pressures, cultural pressures, geographical differences, but this old-fashioned view of, what a man is supposed to be like and be about, shouldn't cry or share a struggle or feel less able to do that or know how to do that. So Movember is a really, really busy month, and I travelled 2,000 miles, international travel, lots of driving, lots of time in the car. And yeah, it kind of took its toll, but I feel grateful to be able to go out there, deliver this message, and really grateful for those people bravely put themselves forward to do some training, to get some awareness, because it starts there, awareness. Unless I'm aware and I've got the knowledge and how to apply that to my life, because the way I'd apply it, my life will be different to anyone else's. So yeah, just feel really, really lucky and grateful to be able to deliver this stuff.
Yeah, incredible. And we need more of it. So you were delivering essentially the course and the tools and the resources and the knowledge to other people so that they could then have that to utilize in what sort of way within their workplaces, or are they becoming trainers themselves?
In any way, as mental health first aiders, but there's lots of different courses now outside of the MHFA. So some companies will say, well, we only need a 4-hour course, and the things we're seeing are anxiety, depression, work in isolation. So there's lots of bespoke courses, but it will teach people how to better recognise and look after their own mental health, support people in the workplace, and of course, friends, family, colleagues, anyone can benefit. It's almost like a life skills, because you're not just going to leave it at work and then, if your partner's struggling, forget those skills and knowledge, or one of your children or something. So it's almost like everyone supports everyone, because life's hard. And why won't we make it easier for each other by being kinder and more compassionate, a good listener? So it's something that people think is a workplace tool, and they go, hang on, I can use that at home. I've got a friend who's gone quiet. I'm going to reach out to them, and it expands.
For those of you that are regular listeners to the show, or maybe you know me personally, you won't have been able to get away without hearing me talk about Simprove. Simprove is a scientifically backed, water-based probiotic drink. You drink it daily, and it has been scientifically proven to help with things like bloating, IBS symptoms, pain. It was actually a dietitian friend of mine that introduced it to me last year, and I honestly wouldn't be without it now. It's helped with my energy, with my bloating, it's helped with my immune system, and also things like my skin. The list is honestly endless. Now, I have got a code for you. So if you'd like to try Simprove, you can get 50%, that's a massive 50% off your first 3-month subscription by going on to simprove.com and putting in the code Nikki50. That's NIKKI 50, or clicking the link in the show notes. This is it. And also, you said something really interesting there. I've got a friend that's gone quiet, and it's not always that, is it? It's not always the people that aren't speaking up. Look at someone like Robin Williams, for instance. I think that shocked everyone, because on the face of it, some people can come across like they are the most confident, most happy on the surface people. And actually, I guess it's really training others to understand the signs beneath that, and the signs that might show otherwise when that's what they're presenting to the world.
Absolutely. We talk about all of that mask, people put the guard up. We're good at coping and dealing with it. You say to me, how you feeling? I might go, yeah, I'm all right. And on the inside, it's something else. Chester Bennington, Linkin Park, Caroline Flack, Keith Flint, The Prodigy. Some of those people in the public eye who presented as supposedly they're normal. And, if I want to invest lots of time in hiding this from you, then I probably can. But what about those people that are showing the little subtleties, the little differences? There's been that little change in my behaviour, appearance, mood. So the stereotype that if someone's struggling, they withdraw, they isolate, they feel down and sad, and they're feeling depressed, and it's a stereotype. It can be that, but it could be so many other different things as well in between. Feeling numb, for example. I don't feel down or sad, but the things I used to enjoy in life, meh. None. So there's all these different things we talk about and explore and break down the stereotype that poor mental health or mental illness looks like this. It can do, it might do, but it can also look like this, and everything in between.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the most interesting part of all of this is your own story and your own struggles. So let's go back then. You said that you struggled with mental health, your own kind of mindset for a long, long time. When did all that start and when did you become aware of it and how did that kind of pan out, I guess, in the end to where you are now?
So my earliest memory was when I was about, I think 12, something like that. And it was things like, thoughts like, turn the light switch on and off 20 times, otherwise your parents would die. There's some horrific outcome if I didn't carry out that compulsion. And at that age, you're like, well, I don't know, is this normal? Is this growing up? But if there's any risk of that happening, I'm going to turn the light switch on and off 20 times. And my parents didn't know, what was going on. The professionals didn't really know what was going on at that point, because back in my day, and I get to say that at the age of 43, but been waiting all my life to sound like my dad and say back in my day, no one spoke. No one talked about it. In fact, it was the opposite. There was lots of stigma, judgment, bullying, discrimination. So you kind of self-learn, I've got to keep this stuff in, and suppression makes it worse. During that journey, there was lots of misdiagnosis, very little support available. And it was only when I did the mental health first aid course, age 35, that I went, you know what? I think I've got obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD. And I went and found a modern GP with a modern approach and experience in mental health. And I told him, and he went, yeah, of course you have. And I'm like, wow, eureka moment. And from that point, I was able to build a recovery. You can't build a recovery around nothingness or a vacuum. Once I'd got the knowledge to go, I think this is worth exploring. And from the age of 35 up to the age of 43, which I am now, that's when I identified and looked at things like, being sober and the effect that's having. Because dual diagnosis is where someone will have a mental illness and a problem with addiction, like a substance. And it's estimated that up to 50% of people in the UK have both. And there's also a stigma that some people might not identify or recognise they've got issues with addiction, or they might not recognise or want to, share they've got a mental illness. So that 50% we know about in reality is a lot higher. So the two can go very much hand in hand. And how I got into addiction, if you like, is because I didn't have the support. I landed in Ibiza age 18. I went, wow, I found myself something that gives me a break. And escape.
Didn't we all?
Yeah, I think a lot of people could probably relate to that. But it was escape from reality. It gave me a break from my own head. And that then brings as many problems as it took away. And it's just a mix. It's a cycle. But until I'd got the awareness, I didn't really recognise or identify with any of this stuff.
Yeah. There's such a link between the party scene and I guess, that numbing out and escaping reality and mental health and mental illness. I think a lot of people, especially when you're younger, and don't get me wrong, there are some people that will, just do it for fun and then move away in their late 20s and it's like, right, that's done with. But I think it does spill over and I've seen it a lot more recently where you're going into your 30s and even 40s and you're still numbing out. You might not be out raving every weekend, but you're still using whether it's alcohol or drugs or whatever it might be to numb out and escape, and you don't realize that you're doing it. So many people just think, I just enjoy a drink or I just enjoy a line or whatever, their choice. And actually it's the what you're trying to escape from that you need to uncover, I guess, isn't it? And it's not just a bit of fun.
No, that's it. It can start with fun, then fun with problems, then just left with problems. But everyone's journey's different. It's kind of like socially acceptable if you've had a bad or stressful day to go and have a few drinks, and there's nothing wrong with that for many people. But for some people that might be habitual. It might become something that's more available or the go-to. So everyone's journey with this stuff is different. That's where awareness will give me the knowledge to go, what is going on here? Is it this, is it that? So yeah, It's a very real modern problem, and often we miss some of the addictions that we're seeing some of the data on that's really scary, like vaping and porn. The effect that's having on our brains now proven to be a real problem, and people are saying, I'm addicted to that. I can't stop that. I've lost the power of control. And with those, often people don't want to talk about it because there's a lot of shame and guilt with pornography and some of these topics.
Yeah. Well, again, pornography is just another escape from reality, isn't it? It's not real life. It's another way of numbing out and looking at something that isn't real and never will be. And the vaping thing, they actually banned vapes, or they're going through the motions to ban disposable vapes now at the moment, aren't they? Which is an amazing step in the right direction. My husband, who has actually just quit vaping, and the harmful shit that's in that stuff that you just don't know what it's doing to you, because we haven't got enough data, have we? So it's a really great step.
No, we haven't. And thing with vaping as well, it's like, you can vape in your car when maybe the person would have chosen not to smoke. You can vape in your office, in your bed. When I was vaping, I'd wake up in the middle of the night to go to the toilet and I'd grab my vape and I'm like, what is going on?
Yeah.
This is getting out of control. Whereas there was those practical steps that sometimes stop people having a cigarette because they don't want to go outside in the cold and they don't want to smoke in the house. But vapes, it's there, available, it's plastic, it's packaged in this kind of fun and lively way, and it's taken over. Like I said, we don't have enough data. We don't really know the effects.
No, we don't. So you did the mental health first aid training, understood that you had got a challenge, a problem, a disorder with OCD, went to the doctor, got a diagnosis, started working on that. You shared at the start of this call, and thanks for doing that and for being so honest, that 3 years ago, I think you said that you were sectioned. How did getting a OCD diagnosis and noticing your own mental health, how did you go from there to end up being in such a poor mental state that you actually ended up getting sectioned?
Great question. So I got the diagnosis. I started to build a recovery around that. And then I wanted to quit drugs and alcohol. Drugs were way back in my youth, but, alcohol, I thought, I'm going to go sober. I want to go sober. I want to move away from this. And I went into CA, AA, NA, Alcoholics Anonymous. There's different takes on that. And I was sober 7 months when I got sectioned. And there's some key points around that in the realms of, and every AA, CA, NA is different. And I've got the utmost respect for them because they save lives and help so many. And if we didn't have that, what other help is available? But when that was written, I think 1935 or 39, mental illness wasn't recognised. It wasn't talked about. So by removing the coping strategies of a lifetime and not recognising that I had a mental illness, being able to talk about that, I was 7 months sober of everything, but absolutely miserable and suicidal, and got sectioned as a result. So it's been a difficult journey with regards to 12-step programs. Some are great, but then some have come across as well. For example, one, they wouldn't sponsor you if you were taking medication for your mental illness. You had to come off all meds before they give you any attention and sponsor you. And I found that horrific. So I emailed in to, this was CA, and they didn't even reply. So I'm not condemning these things, saying there's great and amazing and helpful, but there's also the other end, which is my experience, where it's toxic, cult-like behaviour and very judgmental, where it's our way or the highway, nothing outside of that. Don't talk about depression or anxiety. We're here to talk about addiction. And I'd like to ask, rather than how long have you been sober, first question we should ask is, are you happy? How are you doing?
Yeah.
Numbers of sobriety is irrelevant to me. 3 days, 3 years, are you happy? And it was very, clear-cut directions. Do it our way or no way at all. And even some of the rooms, you couldn't even talk about gratitude because that's like an addition, a bolt-on, something we know can help our neurotransmitters and brain chemicals. No, gratitude isn't in the book. We're not doing it that way. Oh, okay. I've got to stay silent and just listen then. And some of those statements like, shut your mouth and open your ears. It's like, this isn't compassionate. This isn't kind. But I've experienced the opposite as well. Some great rooms and great spaces. You get good and bad in everything.
Yeah, and I think it's each to their own, isn't it? It does seem like a very, very antiquated approach to, I guess, really kind of section off that one challenge or problem that you've got and just assume that it's not related to anything else or not want to acknowledge that there could be other elements at play there. Did you ever find out what the reasoning was behind them not allowing people who are taking medication onto the program?
No, it just seemed that particular group were very by the book, very hardcore, very, if it isn't in that book that was written many, many years ago, which is really sexist, by the way it's written, it's all from a perspective of a man. So that alone needs to be updated. And they don't talk about or recognise mental illness. So it was just like, shut down. We don't talk about that. We're going to go through clear-cut directions, exactly the way it was written. That is the way we're going to do it. And we're going to condemn anyone who has any conversation outside of that. So I think that was just a particularly, I want to say, hardcore group. And that was CA, Cocaine Anonymous. And that's kind of known as the microwave version of the 12-step program. So I did my 12 I did my 12 steps with them in 14 days, which is ridiculously quick. It's too quick. Whereas
wow.
I know. Yeah, I had 49 resentments, things I hadn't thought about for years that weren't relevant. But, my sponsor was saying, well, that bully you had at school, you need to find them and apologise to them. I'm like, really? Because that's going to have a negative effect on mental health. No, you've got to. That's a resentment. Unless you get rid of it, you are never going to stay sober. This was the kind of dialogue. But NA is slower and kinder, and that's a nicer space where you get to work the steps in, I think, a way that it sets a solid foundation. And then AA is kind of great as well. It's different. You've got to explore, find what works for you, and take from it what you can. Because over those experiences, it was overall good. I've gained little bits of knowledge and found my feet with it.
And I know people that have really benefited from AA, and I know others that it wasn't for them. And I think there's quite a religious context to it as well, because it was written, like you say, quite a while ago. And again, I think you just have to take that for what it is, I guess, and whether you use that or whether you exchange the word God for universe or creator or however you want to relate to that. I think you can take or leave bits, can't you? And I think some people have struggled with that. I know people that have gone to AA and said, it's not for me. The first meeting, they wanted us to pray. Well, just don't take that part. There's elements of it. And I think the concept is amazing. So when you got sober, and then it was obviously 7 months later that your mental health deteriorated, do you think that's because you were no longer numbing out and you were having to face up to emotions that you hadn't faced up to in years?
Yeah, totally. I'd removed that coping strategy and not really replaced it with anything. And I kind of bought into that 12-step program at the time. So I was very led, if you told me this, that was that. If you told me to think this way, and any time I tried to raise a concern because I wasn't feeling great in terms of mental health, it was very condemning as well. You're not being honest. You're not praying hard enough. You need to go and do a book study. And it was just like, oh, wow, what am I believing here? I'd kind of lost all sense of self, even though there's that little bit of my soul, my gut saying, this isn't right, Ryan. This doesn't feel right. But I threw myself into it. And yeah, it just resulted in misery. I was sober. And my headspace at that time was, I'll show you, I will kill myself sober. I'm going to be sober 7 months, and I'm going to prove to you that, yes, this is kind of cured or resolved addiction, but I'm miserable. My mental health is shot. So it was a really, really difficult time. But if we can't use that and share it with the world in the hope that it becomes part of someone else's survival guide and let them know, look, if this doesn't fit, doesn't work, that's okay. You're going to find your way. Then, that's the purpose to it all.
Well, that's it, exactly that. And I think the strongest people I know have gone through shit. I don't know one single person that I can think of, either in my immediate circle or otherwise, that hasn't gone through some shit to get to where they are. And that is probably one of the lowest experiences that you can go through. But look at where you are now. So how did you get through that time? Because it sounds like there was elements of the groups and the information and support that they provided you with that was useful, but it sounds to me like you had to do a lot of it on your own. So what tools, resources and actions did you take?
Totally. Came out of hospital, having been sectioned because I was in hospital. I was highly, highly medicated. So that was the first step in withdrawing and reducing from that medication. Even in the crisis service, you had, good and bad. I remember someone coming out to see me doing a home visit. They were amazing. They were compassionate. They were human. And then I've also had experiences when I rang in the crisis team and before I'd even finished talking, and I was only inquiring about when to pick up my prescription, the answer down the phone was, have you had a bath today? And I was just like, what's going on here? Like, it showed me how much work there is to do still out there. So it's been a journey. It was almost like step by step, working it out myself, taking those little things that help me, applying them rather than it's this way or it's this way. What about it being my way? So mindfulness, meditation really helps me. It's also made me really poorly when I'm been bad with OCD because you're basically forcing me to be with myself and be with my own thoughts and that intrusive thought dialogue going round and round. So it's almost like it's trial and error. Physical movement is a big one for me. So I think we are, built to move, whether it's a triathlon, whether it's walking, getting that serotonin production flowing. So yeah, my blueprint for happiness would be from anyone else's, but it's through awareness and knowledge that I've gone, I'm going to try that. Okay, I've got an extra tool for my mental health toolkit. I know when to use it. Okay, I'm going to try that. Being open to other things as well, like crying. I'd have never admitted to or cried back in the day. I'd suppress it because I think that was tough and hard because I'm a former professional MMA fighter. But sometimes the tool that's needed is crying. Sometimes hitting the bag and going to the gym. It's not the right tool. Sometimes it's crying, and that's a human way of processing emotion. So accepting tools that I'd dismissed or shied away from. I want all of it. I want to live happy, and however I do that, whatever I need to do that, so be it.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I think so many more guys that I speak to now, and we were having a brief conversation before we started recording about the fact that, there are more guys listening now to the podcast and they tend to engage more with the sobriety content, get my words out, and less so with things like manifesting and gratitude. And that's absolutely fine. Take what you want from whatever's going to help you, each to their own. But I do think that there is a lot more awareness and a lot more openness now to not just dismissing some of these tools as woo-woo or women shit, and actually saying, well, let's give it a go and see if it works. And crying, for instance, somebody said actually yesterday to me, you wouldn't have 2 tear ducts unless you were meant to cry and release your emotion. We just wouldn't be able to do it if it wasn't something that we were meant to do. So why we've trained our young men and boys for all these years that it's bad and it's weak and it's soft and you shouldn't cry, it's beyond me, because essentially at the heart of it, it is a way of releasing from your body. It's the same as, going to the toilet. It's a way of your body getting rid of something that it needs to. I just think there's so much more work to be done, but it's so nice to hear somebody like you who, like you say, is not, a soft lad or whatever it might be that people would have referred to you as. And you recognise that actually crying, somatic work, movement, all of these things can actually be super useful. And it doesn't mean that you're a girl or you're a hippie or you're spiritual, woo-woo.
No, absolutely not. That's a big part of my message. If I could go out there and say, I've achieved this in my career, not that any of this matters, by the way. I've stood across from someone in a cage with little gloves on who wants to smash my head in. but I cry on a regular basis, and I've got a mental illness. It doesn't matter if you do boxing, ballet dancing, poetry, fine arts. Like we are, like you said, I love that thing about the tear ducts. We're meant to cry sometimes. Suppression makes it worse. And if I cry, I'm better at cage fighting or Brazilian jiu-jitsu or grappling or lifting the weights because it's a release. And I do get that whole kind of, men, blokey, steer clear of gratitude and meditation, because I thought you had to be like cross-legged like the Buddha themselves on a hilltop thinking of being, fluffy music, but there's so many different formats. So breathing techniques, breath work, breathology, Wim Hof, the Iceman's made this popular because when you breathe in a certain pattern and cycle, it has an effect on your autonomic nervous system, and it allows you to relax into a space of meditation. It's like active meditation. You do some breath work first, and then suddenly you go, oh, I feel a bit more peaceful and serene and calm. And, getting into an ice bath, that can be considered, hard, difficult, challenging things to do. So it's finding a way that works for you. It hasn't got to be fluffy and woolly and soft sounds. Find the way that you can meditate. Find your mindfulness. I also explore other things that are out there, and everything I discuss is legal and ethical, but I do some of the Amazonian spiritual medicine like Kambo, Hape, Sananga.
Yeah.
We do these things, and Kambo, the Amazonian tree frog, they've been doing that for hundreds of years in the Amazon, and the first time I did that, I came away from it, and I remember saying to my partner, she was like, how was it? I was like, I never thought I'd say this, but I feel like I found a cure for OCD. Now, that's inaccurate. I'll never be cured. I just have to live with it. I can't forget I've had it like the common cold. But the effect that having Kambo done on me for like 3-4 weeks afterwards, it like I'd just released all this negative energy, all these things I was carrying. I just went, whatever. And, that is legal, it's ethical, it's spiritual. It's been done by the warriors in the tribe of the Amazon for years. And that appeals to me because I do need a little bit of like, come on, let's do this in a way that kind of fits with what I want it to fit with and how I want it to look. So, but it doesn't have information. Some people are going, Kambo, what's that? But it's out. When I first talked about Wim Hof 10 years ago, people were like, what are you on about? Breathing, sitting in an ice bath and having a cold shower. Now look at where Wim Hof, the Iceman's at. We're seeing these Lumi spas pop up everywhere. Kambo will be the same. Hape will be the same. And it's legal, it's ethical, it's authentic. Has it been passed off by some drug company as being safe, like the FDA or whoever? No, of course it hasn't. But do we believe that everything they pass is good for us and right for us? I don't. I'm not going to get into conspiracies, but if it's out the ground in nature and they've been doing it in these places for hundreds of years, I'm down for it. Let me give it a go and see if it works for me.
Absolutely. This is how I feel about stuff. If people talk about spiritual and woo-woo, but it's actually just going back to our roots. The plant medicines and, moon rituals and things like that these have been done for hundreds, if not thousands of years. It's not something new. It's not something we've just invented to try and connect with the earth or with Gaia or with Mother Nature. This is stuff that our ancestors were doing, and we've just lost touch with it through technology and being glued to our phones. For anyone that's listening that doesn't know what Kambo is, I think it's the it sounds a bit mad, but essentially they burn you a bit, don't they? And then put tiny bits of frog poison into the burns, and then it makes you purge. Is that right?
That's the one, yeah. They respect the frogs. They catch them. They get the secretion off their hind legs. They release them back into the forest. It's antibacterial, antifungal, antiviral. You could eat a whole frog. It wouldn't kill you. You'd have a bad day. You'd have a bad time of it. And they burn you. They're called gates. So you can have gates in different places. How many burns or gates you have is up to you. And they'll put the secretion of the Amazonian tree frog into the burn. It'll go in through your lymphatic system. You'll sit there for 20 minutes. You'll feel pretty weird. You might purge and be sick, but you welcome that because you've drank 2 litres of water. It's not like a Saturday night, 12 pints, I've had a kebab kind of sick. It's a welcome purge. My friend doesn't purge. He just vibrates and shakes. And then after that, you get
really?
Yeah, he just vibrates. That's his purge. That's his, like, he's never sick.
Wow.
He just, and then you have the most blissful, I don't want to call it a sleep, like a trance for an hour. And then for the next, with me, 3 or 4 weeks, I just feel like the problems of the world, the modern problems, whatever, I'm more at peace with it. You're not sedated, you're not high. It's like you said, this isn't new. This stuff's been out there for years. It's just with tech and social media and devices, we've come away from this natural approach to living. And I'm a big advocate of Kambo. I've took with me, when people are ready, when they're curious, to have Kambo, maybe 10 people. Every single person has gone on to do it again and again and again. They went, you know what? I'm absolutely going to have that as a tool that I use to deal with and process life.
Yeah, fantastic. So let's talk a little bit more about sobriety and I guess the sober movement, because I know there's a lot of people listening now that essentially listen to this podcast because it's not just necessarily talking about people with dependency or addiction. It's talking about people that just have had a bit of enough of the culture, especially in the UK, let's be honest. I'm not sure about all of the kind of countries and cultures around the world. I think we are probably one of the worst for it. But it's just wild how alcohol is a part of our culture, and yet things like Kambo are frowned upon because they're weird. Yet you can go out on a Saturday night, have 10 pints, smash somebody else in the face, end up in jail, and your mates will congratulate you for it or laugh at it, or it'll be on social media. I think there's more and more people that are just pulling away from that kind of culture and that way of life and that expectation, as well as actually, I guess, alluding to the fact that it is a real mental health issue and a blocker around having good mental health. Most of those people have come to me recently and said, this is something I want to do, but the peer pressure, the expectation, the fact that it's something different that I'm doing, and they might live in and socialize with a group or have friends, family, etc., who just find it very alien that this is something that they want to give up. What's your experiences of that, and what advice would you give to people that are in the situation where maybe they are wanting to go down a different path, but due to peer pressure, social pressure, they're really struggling, find it difficult?
Yeah, it's a tricky question. I know people have had to cut away from certain social groups of friends, because that's what the group of friends were all about. I know people who have been able to go on a night out, remain sober, not have a drink with those friends that would normally drink. For me, though, I couldn't really do that. Like going, let's face it, being around anyone who's pissed when you're not pissed is annoying, right? It's annoying, and you're just like, I want to be here, I want my sober. I've done that and I've enjoyed it, but I've done that, I've not enjoyed it as well. So where my sober journey is, and we hear a lot about that, sober journey, how long have you been sober? Sobriety to me now is, if I want to have a couple of beers without pressure, if I'm able to do that, and I respect some people can't, I'm having a couple of beers. I also equally drink non-alcoholic beer to get the feeling, that kind of placebo effect, that I'm having a cold beer in the sun. For me, trying to be completely and utterly sober, going out with friends who I still wanted to connect with, because that's isolation then, if I'm not able to go out in a social group, and they're having fun, having a laugh, and I don't feel a part of it and connected, that didn't quite work for me. So I've found a space, and not everyone's got this choice, where what's sobriety mean to me? Well, to me, it means not drinking in the week, because if I drink in the week, then I'm not doing the things I need to do. I don't want to go to the gym. I don't want to go grappling or cage fighting. So that practical step of, I'm not going to drink in the week. Then I don't want to drink at home. So how do I put on practical steps that I'm not drinking at home? I'm just going to reserve my drinking if at that point I feel like it, nights out, birthdays, major events, which at the age of 43 are very few. Me and my group of mates now will be like, do you want to go out? Okay, well, it's this person's birthday. It gets to it, you think, I don't want to leave the house. I'm warm. The sofa's comfy. Some people won't have that choice. Some people will be, gripped by addiction where the second they have a drink, they're going to have 20. And that's it. It's a cycle. Some people will be able to get their balance. Some people, everyone's different. So this whole thing within, going back to like AA, CA, you're not allowed to use any mind-altering substances ever, for me, didn't quite fit. And I also think it was a little bit, I don't know, it didn't sit right with me when you're not allowed to drink. Let's say my problem was only cocaine. So I've gone into CA. Now you've got to not drink, not do cocaine, which is why you're here, and not do any other mind-altering substances. But then everyone on the Zoom group or in the face-to-face meeting is blasting on a vape like it's going out of fashion. That didn't right with me, but because vapes or nicotine weren't recognised originally in the book, I'd have this argument with people all day long. You tell me nicotine isn't mind-altering or mood-altering, and you tell me nicotine isn't addictive. So it's this strict sober or not, doing this or not. For me, it's about what does sobriety mean for me, identifying that. Can I put that in place? Have I got the control to be able to put that in place? And it's progress, not perfection. If you go back into some of these groups where you've relapsed, and I use that term loosely, it can be like, they relapsed. So, no, you just had a wobble. You had a bump. You had a bump in the road. Keep going. Keep trying. I respected the person more in those spaces who would relapse again and again and again, but keep coming back. I respected them more than the person that sat on their pedestal with 5 years of sobriety, never touched anything, and we're kind of like, there's this hierarchy. Now, I respect the person that keeps coming back. Well done, you. Keep going. So your sober journey can be different to anyone else's. Write it down, identify it. What are the practical steps to make that happen? What's it mean to you? Simon Sinek does a great book, Start With Why. Why do you want to do this? Keep coming back to your why.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, progress, not perfection. I absolutely love that. And you're right. For me, I did 100 days at the start of last year. And then I always felt guilty drinking again because I was like, I've told people I'm not drinking and made this commitment to myself. But I never had a dependency or a problem, and I say inverted commas problem because I think the culture in the UK around alcohol is a problem regardless. If you're reaching for a bottle of wine every Friday just to end the week, it's a problem. That is a mind-altering substance. But for me, it was more breaking that habit and changing the relationship and actually doing that both at home, so not grabbing a bottle of wine or a bottle of gin on a Friday, and when I was out and having, like you say, an alcohol-free drink maybe initially, which would 9 times out of 10 quell the cravings, and then I wouldn't be tempted to have alcohol. But yeah, you're right. Being around pissed people, I'd say after 3 or 4 drinks, that's when they start getting annoying. The personal space encroachment, the spitting when they talk, they're telling you the same story. I'm good for my sofa when it gets to that point. But yeah, it's definitely different for everybody. And I think that's it. You shouldn't be putting yourself in a position where it's all or nothing. I think, if you've got a dependency, if you've got a problem, and I think I do have to caveat this conversation with, if that is the case, you need to seek medical help, you need to get professional help, you need to cut down safely. But actually, if it is just more you're used to drinking socially, I totally agree with you. I think if you can get to a place where you break that habit, and then you can have the odd beer with friends, or you can go out on the odd night out and it not turn into a bar brawl, or it not turn into you losing your phone, losing your memory, having anxiety, then that's also equally a great place to get to. And it has to be individual for everybody, doesn't it?
Totally, that's it. You can get to that place where the cognitive pathways are going a different direction and you're able to manage and balance it. And in the strict sobriety space, you're kind of told you'll never be able to drink responsibly again. You won't be able to do it. And some people I think that is true for, but equal amount of people that's not true for, where they might create enough distance and the dopamine resets and returns to normal. They've got other tools to change the way they feel. Like if they're stressed, you've had a bad day at work, well, let me try meditation or something else or exercise rather than my go-to. And these cognitive pathways will start to rewrite. Rather than that path we've gone down time and time and time again, it's well trodden, you'll start to branch off and create another pathway, and then that will get stronger. So yeah, this middle space where I don't necessarily want to be completely sober forever, and I don't want to feel guilty if I want to have a drink or a glass of wine on occasion. I think that's the conversation that needs to happen more. That those people can be lost in the middle, and that's where I found myself.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think it's so interesting now, because I was talking to someone the other day whose son is at university now, and there's so much more to do. I mean, when I went to Freshers, it was like you drink to blackout or you're not connected to the people, you're not socializing. Whereas now she was saying there's sober events, there's a lot of his peers that are just choosing not to drink out of choice. It's almost seen as like not cool anymore to get like that. And I feel like it's going down a similar route, probably maybe not in our lifetime anytime soon, but as smoking. And it's becoming one of those things that older people did or do and generations before, but actually it's probably not going to be marketed or pushed in the same way in years to come, because already I'm seeing a step change. Are you seeing similar step changes within your circles and the people that you're speaking to?
Yeah, totally. Because I teach a whole host of different generations, and you definitely pick up on trends where people aren't interested in smoking, younger people, but then it's replaced with vaping. People aren't getting absolutely smashed because they want to go rock climb or outdoor pursuits or go to the gym, because that's a very popular lifestyle. But then, there can be different addictions, if you like, in its place. So steroid misuse is an epidemic now in the UK because Love Island, I want to look like that, I've abs on my abs. So yeah, I might not be getting smashed up and go to the gym, but if they're banging steroids from someone I bought in the gym, that can be an addiction. We mentioned porn, we mentioned devices, that blue light that comes off devices and wrecks our sleep and our melatonin. So it's almost like these ones are fading, and then there's others coming through, and there's no way of measuring what's better or worse. And I don't think back in the day it was better or worse. It's just different problems, different tools needed to recognise what effect this is having on me and my life.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think as we discover or have new addictions, new technologies, things to numb out with, your role as a mental health first aider has to evolve, I'm guessing, because there's different vices, different things that can, somebody might not be addicted to drink and drugs, but that doesn't mean that they haven't got other addictions. And spotting that, I guess your training and your experiences and your knowledge is ever evolving in that sense. Is that what you're finding?
It is, yeah. Different conversations are happening with different groups. People are more open to things like meditation and mindfulness now, whereas back in the day when I taught it, that wasn't really a conversation. A lot of people have heard of cold exposure and ice baths now. We are seeing different addictions, problems, whatever you want to label it as, whether it's a substance or a behavior. So yeah, it is evolving, but it's super interesting. That's why it's important for me to stay kind of one step ahead with what's out there. In the training, we never talk about anything illegal. It wouldn't be moral or ethical. But one of the things I'm seeing an increase in is things like ayahuasca, psilocybin, microdosing. Yeah. Now, you can go to London to a clinic under medical supervision and have microdosing now, magic mushrooms as they're often labelled. And there's some amazing research coming out of that. But obviously I wouldn't have these conversations because these things are still illegal and we don't know enough about them. So, yeah, the world's evolved a lot anyway. Back in my day, you used to have to watch the adverts on TV. You were lucky if your phone had snakes on it and the battery lasts 12 months.
Showing our age now, Ryan.
I'm showing my age. But, these things... back in my day, maybe our day, if you wanted to meet a suitable partner like your beautiful husband Dean, you'd have to go out the house. You'd have to go and dance up to him and go, oh, I want his number, eye contact. All of that's quite an uncomfortable experiences, but it teaches us so we can be more resilient. And, you get the number. Now it's swipe, click, ghost. I haven't even got to say to you anymore, I don't want to carry on this relationship. I don't want to see you anymore. That was a horrible conversation, but you learned a lot about yourself. Now you just go, block. I think all of this is making us that we've built the world to be that comfortable, we're uncomfortable. Anything that's uncomfortable, remove it with tech and devices, but those experiences can build resilience and teach me how to be and interact. So lots of changes, not just with addictions or mental health, but with the world. I've kind of seen a lot of change, and it will continue to change, I'm sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think it was Simon Sinek that you mentioned earlier. He was on a different podcast and he was talking about resilience in younger people, and not to be, it's kind of stereotypical, but I see it a lot in my day job in recruitment. The younger people will, I'd say rarely, but never call me to withdraw from an interview process, or that they'll just drop a text or an email if I'm lucky. Whereas I tend to find that the older generation will have that uncomfortable conversation. And look, at the end of the day, it shouldn't be uncomfortable. I'm not here to push anybody into anything. It's just merely, information exchange. But I've seen it a lot where they just won't have that conversation, or they won't have a conversation with their boss about pay or working conditions or their role or progression. They'll just find something else and leave. And I think it has come from, like you say, everything is so disposable and online now, and we can just swipe on somebody and decide that we don't like them, block them, delete, whatever it might be. And we don't have to have those conversations and put ourselves in those situations. And I mean, that's a whole other podcast episode, but yeah, it's so interesting that you're sort of seeing that as well in your work. What advice would you give to somebody? And let's talk about, I guess, younger people here. It could be anybody, but I guess younger people or people that are just sort of starting to become aware of, mental health and coping strategies. What advice would you give your younger self, and what advice would you give them if they were maybe wanting to add value, to their kind of inner circle, their friendship group around these subjects?
I'd definitely suggest, and I'd have give my younger self this advice, do a mental health first aid qualification. It doesn't have to be that one. You could do lots of different mental health and well-being training courses. Get that knowledge, because only when I've got the knowledge can I look at my own life and how to apply it. If I'd have had, I don't know, let's say I'd have had at school how to be financially responsible and some well-being or emotion, understanding your emotions and your thoughts training. If I'd have had that at school rather than pi r squared and 6 months of French, I'd have been better equipped for life. No disrespect for anyone that's gone on to speak fluent, French or use pi r squared. But me personally, I never used it. It didn't do anything for me in my life.
No.
What would have helped loads is, here's how to be responsible with money, and here's how your thoughts and your feelings interact. Here's a list of things you can do to balance your own personal mental health. So young people, get some knowledge, get equipped to educate yourselves, because mental health is life. And, we're going to move up and down that spectrum. We're all on it. Let's say mental illness at one end. I'm great. I'm brilliant, and a space of well-being at the other end, and all the individual spaces in between. So when I get that knowledge, I can recognise when I'm heading in one direction and rebalance, or I can recognise the things I'm doing that make me feel good. So thoughts, feelings, emotions, behaviours, knowledge. Get some training, equip yourself, because you'll be able to look after yourself and the people in the world you care about.
Yeah, amazing advice. I think that's it. I think when people hear the term mental health or poor mental health, they immediately assume it's like wrapped in your duvet, can't get up, surrounded with takeaway cartons, or suicidal, calling the Samaritans. And like you said, it isn't necessarily that. It might just be that you've stopped taking care of your appearance, or you've stopped turning up on time, or you've just withdrawn, or numbness. People aren't enjoying the things they used to. Being aware of that and being able to spot that, I guess, sometimes can be critical.
Yeah, totally. That's it. We often take the word mental health as a negative. You're right. People go, oh, depression, anxiety, suicide. But if I said physical health, you wouldn't start saying cancer, diabetes, broken leg. If I said physical health, you'd probably think about, the gym and eating well and drinking your water. Mental health's the same. It's not a negative term. It can be the good, the bad, and everything in between. So yeah, totally. We say that out there in the big wide world. People go, oh, what's happened? Well, it's neutral. It's a neutral term to add some context.
Yeah, exactly. So what's next for Ryan then? What are the things? I mean, it sounds like you've got a whole host of things that you want to achieve and do, and get this message out there. What's next on the agenda for you, and what are you hoping to achieve this year?
More teaching, more training, busier year on year. I'm actually keeping a couple of associates busy in training now, because you meet people along this journey, you go, I like the way you do this. You're real, you're human. So I kind of send them a bit of work. I'm working on an international wellbeing platform with a major worldwide engineering company. I can't say who they are, but if I said the name, you'd have heard of them. So super excited to be working on that. So just more of the same. And, the more people we can reach and meet, then hopefully the less people struggle and suffer in silence. So that's why I do what I do. That's why I want to, or need to, get back to social, because the bigger platform, the more people reach, less people struggle and suffer, and that's what it's about. It comes back to the core reason I started doing this, to help other people, to help people.
Brilliant. So if there are people listening now and they want to find you, whether it's for their own personal intrigue and interest and knowledge gain, or whether it could be they work in a workplace that they think could benefit from this sort of training, give us your Insta, your socials, your email, anywhere that you'd want people to be able to come and find you, interact and contact.
Perfect, thank you. My Insta is voice_4_mental health, so voice_4_mental health, and my email address is ridgwaymentalhealth@gmail.com, but a weird spelling in Ridgway. It's RIDGWAY. I think one of our relatives just forgot to put the E in one day because it doesn't make sense, but that's how you spell the email address.
Dean's sister's a Ridgway now. I don't think her fella's any relation to you, but I think they spell it the same way actually. So, but I'll put them in the show notes anyway, so that people can click the links. It's been a joy, an absolute joy, and honestly, I could talk to you all day. There's so much to this, and the the depths that we could go into around all these different topics. But yeah, I think you'll have added a lot of value to people that are listening, and hopefully, people will get in touch and chat about these topics more. So it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me on. Thank you so much for your great podcast and sharing your knowledge, experience, having great guests on, talking about this stuff in a way that I think is really relatable, resonates, it's human. So massive respect to you, and we'll have to do a part 2 soon.
100%. Yeah, there's so much more that I want to chat about, so definitely. But no, thank you so much, and have a fantastic week.
You too. Take care.
Thanks for listening. You can find us on Instagram at HelloSundayPod, or you can email us on hellosundaypod@outlook.com. Have a great week.